Calling the meeting to order. Good morning, everyone. Thank you all very much for coming in for an 8 o'clock start this morning. There's so many of you here, so we really appreciate it. I'm sure you didn't appreciate the call for 8 o'clock, but thank you all very much for making it here this morning. So we gather here this morning to do a study of a number of votes from the Supplementary Estimates A, 2018-19. Namely votes 1A, 5A, 10A, 15A, and 20A under Department of Transport, Vote 1A under Canadian Air Transport Security Authority, and Vote 1A under the Canadian Transportation Agency. I'm delighted to welcome the Honourable Marc Garneau, Minister of Transport, along with officials from Transport Canada, namely Michael Keane, Deputy Minister, been here often to visit us, Andre Lapointe, Assistant Deputy Minister, Corporate Services and Chief Financial Officer, as well as Laura Hansen, Assistant Deputy Minister, Policy. And on behalf of the Canadian Air Transport Security Authority, I would like to welcome Neil Perry, Vice President, Service Delivery, and Nancy Fitchett, Acting Vice President, Corporate Affairs and Chief Financial Officer. And for the Canadian Transportation Agency, I'd like to welcome Liz Barker, Vice Chair, and Manon Fillion, Chief Corporate Officer. We also have representatives from 3 other departments. For the Department of Western Economic Diversification, we have Barbara Motsney, Assistant Deputy Minister, Policy and Strategic Direction. For the Department of Indian Affairs and Northern Development, we have Sheila Murphy, Assistant Deputy Minister, Lands and Economic Development. And for the Department of Indigenous Services Canada, we have Scott Dodge, Director General, Non-Insured Health Benefits Directorate, First Nations and Inuit Health Branch. So welcome to everyone. Thank you very much for coming. Vote 1A under the Department of Transport. Minister Garneau, for 5 minutes, please.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Mesdames et Messieurs, je vous remercie de m'avoir.
Ladies and gentlemen, I'm pleased to be here to talk about some of the important work being done in the federal transportation portfolio. As you know, I'm joined by the people that mentioned by the chair of the committee. The work being done in the federal transportation portfolio includes Transport Canada, Crown corporations, agencies, and administrative tribunals. Funding for these federal organizations helps to make Canada's transportation system safer, more secure, more efficient, and more environmentally responsible. These organizations in the federal transportation portfolio, as well as myself, remain committed to sound fiscal management and solid stewardship of government resources while delivering results for Canadian taxpayers.
Le budget supplémentaire des dépenses.
Supplementary Estimates A for Transport Canada 2018-2019 totals $32 million. This includes funding for a variety of programs. There's also new funding of $10.5 million. Most of this new funding will be used to transition to the Government of Canada's holistic and transformative system for impact assessment and regulatory decision-making.
This will allow Transport Canada to meet its responsibilities, which have been expanded under the new impact assessment and regulatory review system. This includes a transformative approach to working with Indigenous peoples to advance reconciliation, recognize and respect Indigenous rights and jurisdiction, foster collaboration, and ensure Indigenous knowledge is considered. This system includes modifications that would create the Canadian Navigable Waters Act, which is currently before Parliament as part of Bill C-69. The changes would ensure the public right to navigate is protected in Canada's navigable waters and will restore lost protections and incorporate modern safeguards. Le budget supplémentaire des dépenses comprend un report de fonds.
These supplementary estimates include a reprofiling of funds totaling $21.6 million. Reprofiling includes funding for safety-related capital infrastructure at local and regional airports for a variety of rail safety projects under our Rail Safety Improvement Program and for maintenance on ferries on the East Coast. Transfers from Transport Canada to other federal departments in these supplementary estimates total less than $1 million, and $840,000 are listed for statutory employee benefit plan costs related to the aforementioned projects. I am very proud of Transport Canada's ongoing work.
Was to highlight a specific priority, which is investment in our country's transportation corridors, particularly our trade corridors. Trade corridors to global markets is one of the 5 themes of Transportation 2030, our government's strategic plan for the future of transportation in Canada. We can have the best products in the world, but if we can't get them to our customers quickly and reliably, we will lose business to other suppliers. We are working with stakeholders to address bottlenecks, vulnerabilities, and congestion along our trade corridors, and the Trade and Transportation Corridors Initiative is a significant part of this effort. We announced the Trade and Transportation Corridors Initiative in July 2017, including the National Trade Corridors Fund, which is a cornerstone of this initiative. The National Trade Corridors Fund is designed to help infrastructure owners and users to invest in our roads, bridges, airports, rail lines, port facilities, and trade corridors. Through this fund, our government is investing $2 billion over a span of 11 years. We have already announced funding for projects including railway corridors, airport runways, port facilities, bridges, highways, and more. These are critical transportation assets that support the movement of goods and people in Canada. Funding the National Trade Corridors Fund has been accelerated, as you know, to enable more projects to address bottlenecks to trade diversification. Our trade corridors are important for moving domestic trade to international markets and for helping Canadian businesses to compete, grow, and create more jobs for the country's middle class. Canada is a trading nation, and 1 in 6 Canadian jobs depend on international commerce. For our economy to succeed, we have to ensure that our products, our services, and our citizens have access to key global markets. This is an important reason why I'm proud of the work of Transport Canada that they are doing throughout the Trade and Transportation Corridors Initiative and the National Trade Corridors Fund. Toutefois, Transport Canada n'est pas la seule organisation à faire partie.
Transport Canada is not the only organization in the federal transportation portfolio. The Canadian Air Transport Security Authority is also an important part of the Canadian transportation landscape. CATSA is seeking to reprofile $36 million of capital funds in the Supplementary Estimates A of this year. The majority of this capital reprofile, approximately $29 million, is for postponed equipment purchase and integration work for the new hold baggage screening system. This is a part of CATSA's Capital Lifecycle Management Plan and is intended to align with revised airport project plans. Madam Chair, my mandate has not changed since being named Minister of Transport 3 years ago. I continue to work to ensure that Canada's transportation system supports economic growth and job creation. I continue to work to ensure that our transportation system is safe, reliable, and facilitates trade as well as the movement of people and goods. Also, I continue to work to ensure that our roads, ports, and airports are integrated and sustainable and allow Canadians and businesses to more easily engage globally. The financial resources sought through these supplementary estimates would help the organizations in my portfolio as we continue to ensure that our transportation system serves Canadians' needs now and for years to come. Thank you. And if you have any questions, I would be happy to answer them.
Much, Minister Garneau. On to 6 minutes with Ms. Block.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. And I do want to thank you, Minister Garneau, for joining us today, 90 minutes. We're very pleased to be able to answer many questions or ask many questions, and look forward to your answers. I also want to welcome the departmental officials that you've brought with you. There's quite a team here today. And I do appreciate the fact that you've taken the time to join us this morning. I know that we are studying supplementary estimates and government spending, but I would like to ask some questions around a bill that we studied recently, was referred to us by the Finance Committee. It was part of the Budget Implementation Act, so Bill C-86, and there were a couple of divisions that were in the Budget Implementation Act that I think directly come from Transport Canada. They were buried within this Budget Implementation Act between pages 589 and 649. They are sections 22 and 23, and they contain substantial changes to the Canada Shipping Act and the Marine Liability Act. One of the witnesses appearing before committee for the Chamber of Shipping noted that Clause 692 of this bill appears to be another mechanism with which to implement a moratorium on specific commodities through regulation and interim order and not legislation, as the government has already done through Bill C-48. The witness noted that this contradicts what should be the government's objective in providing a predictable supply chain. And quite honestly, Minister, there is no question in my mind that the inclusion of this clause in C-86 will have a further chilling effect on Canada's oil and gas industry. And so my question for you this morning is, can you assure Canadians that this will not be yet another measure to undermine Canada's oil and gas sector?
I thank my colleague for the question, and of course the parts that she's referring to in Bill C-86 have to do with modifications we will be making to the Canada Shipping Act of 2001 and the Marine Liability Act, and these were referenced specifically in the budgets of 2017-18 in the context of the Oceans Protection Plan, which is a very important government initiative. Canada relies on safe and clean coasts and waters for trade, for economic growth and quality of life, and we also recognize that our oceans hold a special place in the traditions and culture of Canadians, notably Indigenous communities. We are taking decisive, concrete action to ensure that our oceans will continue to be enjoyed by all Canadians today and for generations to come. To support safe and environmentally responsible shipping, Divisions 22 and 23 of Bill C-86 propose legislative amendments to enhance marine environmental protection and strengthen marine safety. That is the purpose of those two.
Thank you. Thank you very much. I appreciate your answer on that. I would like to follow up with you on another question, since you did raise the Oceans Protection Plan, and we had this question for your ADM who appeared before our committee on C-86. And we have understood that the Oceans Protection Plan legislative consultations concluded on Friday, October 26th, and Bill C-86 was tabled on Monday, October 29th. Now, look, as good as the lawyers are within Transport Canada and at the Justice Department, no one really believes that they could actually get these clauses drafted and to the printer in 2 days. In fact, the shipping community was very surprised to see these clauses included in Bill C-86. So my question for you, Minister, is when did you decide to include these substantial changes in the BIA? And why did Transport Canada's website continue to suggest that these consultations were still ongoing?
I can tell you that we have been focusing on the Oceans Protection Plan for now a little over 2 years. As you know, it was announced on the 7th of November by the Prime Minister in Vancouver. I was beside him at the time. And there are over 50 measures involved in the Oceans Protection Plan. It is truly a world-leading initiative to ensure that our oceans are safer, that our marine environment is more protective, that our capability to respond is greater. And one of the parts of this that we have always been planning to do is to make changes to these two acts that I mentioned to you before. One of them is directly related to liability in case there is a spill, and we've made some very important changes there with respect to that. And the other one is also to have the capability within the government to make certain changes to protect marine species, such as the ability to order slowdowns, let's say in the Salish Sea, if we decide that it is important for the protection of endangered species. So we wanted to strengthen.
Thank you, Minister. I would like to just quickly follow up. I think I have 45 seconds left.
About 20. So.
Okay, so witnesses who appeared before committee did note that these were the most substantial changes to be made to the Canada Shipping Act and the Marine Liability Act. In one case, 10 years, and in another case, 25 years. So very surprised and perhaps even disappointed to see that these were buried within a Budget Implementation Act. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much,
welcome.
Mr. Block. Ms. Block, on to Mr. Hardy, please, for 6 minutes.
Oh, thank you, Madam Chair, and good morning to everybody, and thanks for being here. Minister Garneau, we've been spending a little bit of time looking at a couple of very important trade corridors in Canada. My colleague Vance Badaway and I were fortunate to have studies done in our home areas. And looking at the West Coast, I wondered if you could comment on the role and mandate of the WestTAC group. Because I understand they have a coordinating function with respect to planning and implementation of improvements in the trade corridor.
Yes, I'd be pleased to, Mr. Hardy, to comment on that. In fact, my Deputy Minister is involved with WestTAC as well as a government representative, and as you hint, it is an organization that is strongly focused on the fluidity of transportation on the West Coast. And of course, the Port of Vancouver, as we all know, is by far the largest port in Canada. And there is significant concern about bottlenecks in the Lower Mainland and all the way into the inland port of Ashcroft to ensure that we are moving goods as efficiently as possible to this very strategic port. So WestTAC fulfills an important function in that respect. Certainly the dialogue about where the bottlenecks are crucial to our decision-making process, so that when we do, through the National Trade Corridors Fund, award funding to particular projects where the purpose, I might repeat, is to reduce bottlenecks or eliminate them, the input from WestTAC is an extremely important input.
One of the things that we had noticed in our conversations with the various component parts of Metro Vancouver's trade corridor was there's an option to spend an awful lot of money there to improve the corridor. You mentioned choke points, and there are 3 that lead to the North Shore, where a lot of the bulk and break bulk terminals are located in the inner harbor, as we call it. There's the bridge at New Westminster, which is over 100 years old now. There's a tunnel that goes underneath Burnaby Mountain, and then there's another bridge that crosses right next to the Second Narrows Bridge. And looking at the cost of potential improvements there, they would be quite substantial, but at the same time, the potential for growth in terms of the material handling capabilities of the North Shore of Burrard Inlet is somewhat limited. And a concern arises that we need to have oversight that looks at the big picture, not just necessarily the component parts, and to start to identify alternatives for development that might not necessarily be in the field of vision of the railways or Port Metro Vancouver, etc. Are you sort of satisfied that we have that kind of line of thinking going?
Well, I agree with what you've just expressed, and we do need to not just zero in on specific projects, and there are a lot of specific projects that are recognized as bottlenecks, some of which we addressed in our first awarding of contracts or of funding under the National Trade Corridors Fund. We've announced them during the course of the past few months. But you're right. We should look at the bigger picture, and I believe that our department, when it judges the different applications for funding for the different bottlenecks that are in the Lower Mainland, that we do look at the big picture with the idea of optimizing each time, because that's the most important criterion. How much will this help to make the transportation that is more fluid? Because as you know, the Port of Vancouver and the railways, and there are 3 Class 1 railways that come into it, as well as a very large amount of trucking, in a very, very busy area where there are lots of people going about their lives and driving their cars, has to be really looked at in a way that we can optimize for the taxpayers' money, because there is more demand than there is money. So I think that in itself forces us to try to optimize towards what will provide the best long-term solution in terms of that transport fluidity.
I think a lot of people were comforted by the move to a new class of rail cars for shipping oil. And we know that that's the backup in the event that, or until such time as we get more pipeline capacity to the West Coast. But in terms of the overall shipping regime, you know, there's our grains to move, there's obviously more oil to move. What's your sense of how the rail system is performing in kind of the national interest, the national strategy for getting the right things to market?
Well, I think that the changes that were made in the modernization of the Transportation Act, and I'm referring to Bill C-49, went in the right direction to try to optimize the movement of commodities. We happen to be at a time when there is a very strong demand for moving goods in this country. And you're right to point out that it is the movement of grain, but it is also the movement of many other commodities. And, you know, I hear regularly from the mining community, from the forestry community, from the potash community, and these are important commodities that are headed for our ports. And, of course, right now, an increased demand for shipping oil by rail as well. So the railways know that that there is a strong demand because they're receiving it, but at the same time, we have to ensure that there is not a focus that advantages one commodity versus other commodities, and that is essentially the situation that you have to deal with when the economy is running strongly, which it is at the moment, and there is enormous demand for Canadian products.
Thank you very much. On to Ms. Benson. Welcome to our committee this morning.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you, Minister, for being here, and all the folks from the various departments. And I'm going to turn the conversation a little bit. Obviously, I come from Saskatchewan, so the issue of access to affordable transportation for rural, remote communities and people's abilities to actually travel are concerns for me, and I've raised them a number of times, and in particular the safe transportation for Indigenous women and the support we provide for public transportation, I would say public transportation outside of large urban centers. I know that people may have not necessarily heard what I say, but I see the bus service in Western Canada as our subway, and feel it deserves support and leadership from the federal government. And you know, since it's been almost 2 years since the Saskatchewan Transportation Company was closed, which meant 253 communities in Saskatchewan lost bus service. And I think for those folks to understand that are listening today, that means more than just having a inexpensive way to get to the city to do some shopping. We're talking about students' ability to go to post-secondary education, people's ability to be employed, and the movement of medical supplies between urban centers and smaller centers, and then, of course, people actually accessing health care. And then, of course, the other shoe dropped, and we lost Greyhound service in Northern Ontario and the rest of Western Canada. So I have a couple of questions to get an update on what I feel is the federal government role in this, and I guess just to put some parameters around. I understand jurisdiction, but it's also my feeling that any level of government can lead on an issue to bring people together and help provide a service to communities while cooperating with other levels of government. So I just put that out there to encourage you to think about what is the role for the federal government. So we have heard that concerning Greyhound that anywhere between 87% and 90% of the routes have been covered. I'm wondering, Minister, if you could let us know where are the routes that currently are not being covered, and what is the federal government's plan to deal with that? And in particular, I'd be interested where those routes are if one province is really being sort of left out in the cold, so to speak.
Well, thank you for your question. And, you know, since July, when Greyhound announced that they were pulling out of the West and a little part of Northern Ontario, our ministry did get together with the provinces. You're right, there are people, even though transportation by coaches has been on the decrease for a very long time. There are vulnerable populations that depend on it, people who have no other choice financially, and people in remote regions. And so there has been a coordination between the federal and the provincial. And when I say the federal, we've also brought in Indigenous Services Canada and CERNA, as well as ISED, so that we could look at this challenge that is in front of us. As you point out, there was a take-up by about 87%, on 87% of the routes that were dropped by Greyhound. And that's a good thing because they feel that they can make it a go of it. But you're right, there's also some that haven't been. We can provide you with the details of the actual trajectories that we're talking about that haven't, but we have a plan there as well. And the plan there was that, and they're in, mostly they're in, if you look at what's been lost by Greyhound leaving, they're in Alberta and British Columbia. And we have worked with those two provinces so that if at some point they go out with a request for proposals to find somebody, to find a line that would be doing it through a competitive process, that we would be there to financially assist them. And that is the plan with respect to that. But on Indigenous and remote communities, we've also, and this is through ISC, we have put in place a plan to work with Indigenous communities that want to also set up a capability commercially themselves, and so we feel that that process is underway as well. But one final thing, that's only a short-term solution. We need a long-term solution. So part of what we announced a few weeks ago also includes, within 2 years, coming up with a more national, and we're talking about all 10 provinces and 3 territories.
Okay. You have 10 seconds left, Ms. Benson.
Can I just sort of underline a point that that people be included, those who need to access services, particularly those with disabilities, when we're starting to talk about a plan for Canada, and I would suggest you start where there is no bus service or where that we're really struggling. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ms. Benson. On to Mr. Graham.
Thank you for being here. As you're aware, one of the significant issues is, in my writing, we have over 10,000 lakes. And the situation can sometimes be complicated, determining who's responsible for what's on the water, what's in the water. The Department of Transportation has restrictions when it comes to ships. And we know a conversation has been started. Maybe you or your assistants could tell us where the conversations are at in that respect. If I've understand your question correctly, you're talking about jurisdiction over lakes for navigation. And you are right to say that traditionally, it is the federal government who has that role. However, we recognize that creates a great deal of problems when it comes to local regulations that apply to lakes. Currently, we are working on it. This project is somewhat long-term, I must admit, in order to find a way to delegate this jurisdiction. Delegate it to organizations that are more relevant. We're talking about municipalities, so that they can have the latitude they need while respecting the need to protect navigation on our lakes. At the same time, we need to give them flexibility. This work has not yet been completed, but that's the direction we're going in, because we recognize that it would be more flexible and respond better to the needs of municipalities. I appreciate that. As you know, that's a significant issue for us with lakes, small lakes that have big ships that cause significant damage. Therefore, that's very important for us.
I think we're all very happy to hear about the InSight landing yesterday, and I think you might have some particular excitement for that as well on Mars. No.
So did you want my comments on it?
I'd love your comments on it.
Well, I thought it was an extraordinary. I think that, beyond even space flight with humans, I think that the ability to land a rover or a vehicle on Mars is the most technically demanding challenge that any spacefaring nation faces, and only the United States has ever been able to land and have an operational rover or experiment on the surface of Mars. Now, it's early days. They've landed, but they still have to check out all the systems. But I think it is a testimony to the brilliance of NASA, particularly the Jet Propulsion Labs in Pasadena, California, which run all of these things. And I'm very excited and will be watching very carefully what scientific results they're going to look underground come out of it. But so I wish it was under transport space, but I haven't been successful yet with my colleague, Minister Baines.
Well, we'll work on that. Back to Canada for a second. Via Rail, you've announced a renewal for the fleet. Can we give an update of where we're at with that?
So Via Rail is a Crown corporation. The Government of Canada recognized that the passengers fleet, the passenger rail car and locomotive fleet was in need of replacement. Some parts of it were over 40 years old, and so we announced some time ago that VIA would launch a competition. That competition is underway, and it is open to the world. And at this point, we're looking forward fairly shortly to hearing back officially from Via Rail on which company will be awarded the contract to replace these old passenger cars. And I know they're old because I take them every week myself between Montreal and Ottawa. And I think that's very exciting. And this is in the corridor between Quebec and Windsor, where the greatest amount of traffic is taking place, and with the objective of having the first new vehicles coming out starting in 2022.
Okay, and so we can expect this will significantly improve passenger service or at least experience. Yeah.
I know that VIA is always striving to improve its service and its on-time record. And when you have new equipment, if you get the right equipment, then you're going to be spending less time doing maintenance, which helps to improve the reliability.
That's fair. Very quickly, you have the Airports Capital Assistance Program. Can you talk a bit about what this program is and why it's important? Now, there's 5 airports in my riding, so it's always interesting to hear about possibilities.
So the Airports Capital Assistance Program has been in place for about 20 years, I think, roughly, and has awarded close to $900 million to our airports. Every year, there's about $38 to $40 million that's allocated. There are many airports across the country. The 5 you mentioned in your riding. To be eligible, you have to have and the actual funding is for safety improvements at that airport. That can be lighting, it can be snow clearing equipment. It has to be safety related. There are a lot of applicants every year, so we can't do it for everybody. And there is a requirement that the airports in question have a regular service for flights of at least 1,000 passengers per year, and that they're non-federal. And it's a very hotly competed federal program, and we announce every year those airports that receive funding.
Are PPR
I'm sorry,
airports
Mr. Graham, time is up. On to Mr. Badaway.
Good morning, and thank you for being here this morning. I'll preface my question by stating that I think for the most part, and as Mr. Hardy recognized, taking the trip out to Niagara as well as Vancouver, we learned a great deal about the changes that are happening within world trade, the transport of global trade, the products contained within, therefore the need to update our trade corridors. Let's face it, at the end of the day, we found out quickly how content and complacent this nation has been for the past many generations, and to some extent have now or are now sitting on archaic transportation assets, and therefore a need to be very strategic, to become more of an enabler, utilizing those assets will in fact, as you mentioned, Mr. Minister, will in fact strengthen our nation's overall global performance. And I congratulate you after decades of contentness and complacency, and therefore the economy suffering because of same, the efforts as well as the direction that you're taking is much welcomed, especially being part in Niagara as one of the nation's strategic trade corridors. So with that, my question, Mr. Minister, taking into consideration transport, infrastructure, workforce labor, global affairs, environment, international trade, finance, economic development, fisheries, intergovernmental affairs and relations, how is Transport Canada, how are you utilizing a whole-of-government approach to invest, to integrate, and to optimize, to then therefore update our fluidity when it comes to moving global trade?
Well, thank you, Mr. Badaway, and may I commend you for the work that you're doing in the Niagara area with respect to trade corridors, because that is an important entry point, particularly for trade between Canada and the United States. I would answer your question by saying that the recent fall economic statement gives a very strong hint of where we're looking at trade with respect to a whole-of-government approach. There were, of course, measures in that fall economic statement that were focused on trying to make our Canadian enterprises more competitive, and accelerated depreciation on capital investments was a very good example, which we believe that will create jobs. And of course, if you create jobs and you make more products, you've got to move those products. And so the significant part, although it perhaps may not have been mentioned too much, was the fact that the government took some of the funding for out years on the National Trade Corridors Fund and moved it forward so that we would have access to that funding for the National Trade Corridors Fund. As you know, we've had one competition. We awarded 39 projects, $800 million. There is such a strong demand for this because there's a recognition that it is crucial for the economy to move our goods efficiently, that we welcomed the fact that there is money that was for later years that has been moved forward so that we can continue going out and having more projects for the National Trade Corridors Fund, which will improve the movement of goods and will be good for the economy. So I think the government has clearly recognized the crucial function of transportation in getting our goods to market, because if we don't, our clients will go elsewhere.
In terms of, again, going to the whole-of-government approach, and again, I congratulate you for doing that, because it's something that, quite frankly, in my former life as a mayor, was extremely frustrating when we had to communicate individually versus having a government that actually communicates within very effectively. So besides the 10 ministries I mentioned earlier, and I'll add science and innovation and a lot of the R&D and the science behind a lot of encouraging universities, colleges, and new product to come on the market. How do you, or how are you working with those different ministries to, in fact, once again, create that fluidity with what we're expecting, an added GDP, an expanded GDP well into the future? How are you working with those different ministries to ensure that we're all communicating to then therefore become more of an enabler through the transport of those goods internationally?
Well, transportation is a highly technical area, and there are a lot of examples of where it is becoming increasingly sophisticated in terms of transportation. An example would be the fact that we're exploring truck platooning as a possible future method of transporting a great deal of merchandise by truck. And of course, truck platooning is where a platoon of trucks, several trucks are following each other, but there is a coordination between the trucks that's all done via technology so that they are all following each other. This is something that is being done throughout the world at the moment. In many Western countries are developing this capability. So we rely on science and technology to help us to implement this kind of system. Having been in a platoon of trucks in a demonstration at a Transport Canada facility, it is a very impressive capability. It's also fixed in such a way that the separation between trucks minimizes the aerodynamic drag on the truck behind it so that you can get fuel economies as well. So Canada is working on that kind of development, not to mention autonomous vehicles, which is another area, not to mention drones, which are also a very strongly emerging field. So in all of those cases, we need to make use of the best available technological capability, but also the science that will help us to deal with these new disruptive technologies.
Thank you very much, Minister Garneau. On to Mr. Liepert for 6 minutes.
Thank you, Minister, for being here and for being here for 90 minutes, but I only get 6. So I'd like to try and ask some quick questions, and hopefully we can use Committee of the Whole rules where the answers don't exceed the length of the questions. I want to ask you about Transportation 2030. You state in there that we have the best products in the world, but if we can't get them to our customers quickly and reliably, we lose business to other suppliers. When we were in Vancouver, the Port of Vancouver has something like $2 billion worth of construction underway today, helping get products to customers. Yet, the CEO of the Port of Vancouver said if Bill C-69 had been law 2 years ago, not $1 of that investment would be made today. How can you make the statements you made about Transportation 2030 and still rationalize a bill like C-69 being pushed through by this Liberal government?
Well, all I can say to you is I didn't make that statement. You referred to the CEO of the Port of Vancouver. He can speak for himself on that. Bill C-69, in our opinion, is absolutely necessary because the previous government, the government that you represented, gutted a lot of the protections for the environment that were an important part.
But you're the transportation minister. You should not. That's the environment minister's job to make those statements. You're the transportation minister. You're supposed to be fighting on behalf of Canadians, getting their supplies to world markets, and that's not happening with our oil and gas industry today.
Well, I'll be glad to tell you, we talk to each other in our government, the different ministers, and we believe that we can juggle several balls at the same time.
Okay, so then you are obviously losing the argument within your own caucus, so I'll leave it at that. I want to also
I wouldn't put it that way myself, but you can.
Like to, and I will. I'd like to also stay on Transportation 2030. It says right in the statement that one of the goals is to decrease the cost of air travel for Canadians. So how do you rationalize that with the carbon tax that's been put on aircraft, where they have no other choice but to use jet fuel?
So if you looked at the, in detail at the measures in Bill C-49, which we're very proud of, there were several measures to increase competition. And competition, I think you would agree, has the potential of lowering costs. And one of the significant measures that we took was to increase foreign ownership in Canadian Airlines from the 25% limit that used to exist to 49%. So this allows more foreign investment, up to 49%, in Canadian Airlines and can generate new ultra-low-cost carriers, which can help competition and which can lower prices and offer new destinations. That's one part of it that we announced in C-49. We also had some other measures dealing with joint ventures as well. So we think that we're doing good things to increase competition.
So because you didn't address the carbon tax issue, I can assume this is another loss for the Minister of Transport on behalf of Canadian business to the Minister of Environment within this Liberal cabinet. So let's move on then. I wanted to ask you whether or not you are satisfied with how our airports are being managed with the current structure that exists for boards, airport authorities.
Yes, I'll answer that. To the tail end of your comment, we, unlike, unfortunately, your party, believe that pollution implies costs and that we can't ignore it. It's not free, as your government, as your party seems to believe. Yeah, on airports, better is always possible. There's no question. With the increase in the amount of travel by air in this country, there's more and more pressure on our airports. I was very, very glad to be at Toronto Airport recently, which won the prize for the best large airport customer service in North America. However, there are, with more and more passengers, there are more pressures on CATSA, which is the security organization responsible for ensuring that when you do go to the airport okay, so good. So that is an area where we need to make improvements. I think our airports are coping with the expansion. There are always stories about people not being satisfied, but I think that generally speaking, our airports do a very good job, especially if you compare the airports in other countries.
I have one last question that I want to ask. As I said, I only have 6 minutes. This committee is currently doing a study on airport noise, aircraft noise at large urban centres. One of the things that seems to have come out of the testimony that we've had is that it's very difficult to find out who actually is responsible at the end of the day for these concerns. I'm presuming that we as a committee will make a recommendation or make several recommendations to you as a minister. Will you confirm today that after receiving a report from this committee and studying it, you will make a response to it and it simply won't sit and collect dust?
I always take all reports that come from this committee seriously, so we will look at that, and I value the input that you will be providing on a very important issue of noise.
But will you respond to the report?
I respond to every report that comes out of this committee.
Thank you.
It will be one of the requests on our report when we file it in the House, is that they report back in a specified amount of time. We see the interest of all of the committee members. On to Ms. Damoff, and welcome to the committee this morning.
Thank you, Chair. And how much time do I have?
6 minutes.
Okay, thank you. Minister, thank you for being here today. You and I have had a number of questions around pedestrian and cycling safety, and I really appreciate your engagement on the issue. I know you had announced an intergovernmental task force to improve the safety of vulnerable road users, in particular around heavy vehicles. And in the spring of this year, you had invited the public to take part in an online consultation. And I'm just wondering if you could update us on your efforts around pedestrian and cycling safety.
Well, thank you very much for your question. And I'll preface it by saying that there are many areas of transport that are shared jurisdictions between provinces, in some cases municipalities, and the federal government. However, the issue of vulnerable road users that you refer to, pedestrians and cyclists, particularly now that more and more people are I would say, walking and biking, and that there are even bike paths in busy cities, has brought to light the fact that there have been fatalities and serious injuries, particularly, as you say, from heavy vehicles. I personally, in my riding, there 2 people have died, lost their life as a result of that. And what we decided to do about a year ago, what I decided to do was to work with the provinces to see if we could address this growing problem. As you said, there was consultation. In fact, there was a tour of several cities as well as online input from Canadians, and it led to a report that was published in the late summer. And that report basically identified over 50 measures that could be implemented if different levels of government chose to implement them, including the federal, to improve the situation. Some would have a greater effect, some would have perhaps a lesser effect, but the actual assessment of each measure was not done. It was mainly a listing of all the things that could be done at the 3 levels of government. That's a very important document, and we will be following up when I meet with my provincial and territorial counterparts in January to take this to the next step and make decisions about which measures we should all consider to put in place to make roads safer for Canadians. And there are some federal ones as well, which I'm looking at, and we will have more to say when we've had that meeting.
Thank you, Minister. And coupled with what our infrastructure minister has done around funding for infrastructure around active transportation, cycling and walking, it's very much appreciated in my riding and across Canada. So thank you very much. I'm going to turn it over to my colleague who has a question for you as well.
Thank you. Minister, I had the pleasure of spending the day with you in Mississauga, and also really enjoyed hearing firsthand your experience of being launched into space, as well as the University of Toronto students. Early in the day, you were speaking at the Mississauga Board of Trade, and I was just wondering if you could get on the record here for the committee some of the numbers you were talking about in terms of transportation announcements in the Peel and GTA region.
So I'd have to dig that up because there were 39 projects. My speech is not at hand with me this morning, but there have been investments in the Peel and region, York region. If I could get back to you on it, but I think that if memory serves me correctly, there were something like 58 projects or something, and I can't remember the exact amount, but it is part of the different programs that Transport Canada does regulate and coordinate. And I know that there were some significant ones because I mentioned them in the speech. I wouldn't have mentioned them in the speech if there hadn't been, but I can't remember offhand the numbers. I'm sorry.
If we could ask for the exact numbers to be provided to the committee.
No, we can provide those to Mr. Second.
Okay, thank you very much.
Please supply them to the clerk, and she will distribute them to all members of the committee, please.
Turning it back to me because there's about a minute left. Is that right, Chair?
Yes.
Minister, you've had conversations with Air Canada about the fix for the Airbus that would deal with a lot of the airplane noise that I know my constituents contact me about fairly regularly. And I'm just wondering if you could update us on your conversations with Air Canada on the Airbus noise issue.
Yes, and what we did specifically was to ask Air Canada, which has a fleet of Airbuses, and some of these Airbus 320s have this device that protrudes below, I think it's the left wing, the port wing, and it creates quite a bit of noise as the airplane is coming in. There is a fix for that where the wing can be made flush, and it is something that Air Canada has undertaken to do on all its fleet when it brings those airplanes in for regularly scheduled maintenance. So it's something that will be done over time. The process is underway. It affects mostly the GTAA, but it does affect some other airports as well. This is good news. In terms of the specific schedule when the very last one will have been completed, I don't have that at the moment, but it is something we can ask Air Canada. And I do have some statistics, Mr. Sagan. Whoops, I just lost them. Sorry. I can't find them anymore, but I'll get back to you on your statistics.
Thank you very much, Minister. On to Mr. General for 5 minutes.
Wonderful. Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you, Minister, for being here. It's great to see the Minister show up for supplementary estimates, unlike the Infrastructure Minister, where I feel we all collectively agree that was a bit of a disaster of a last meeting. I do want to ask you, Minister. We have a premier out of Alberta who's requesting increased rail capacity up to 120,000 cars extra. She's requested support from the federal government, apparently hasn't received it. There's nothing in the fiscal update. Crude by rail isn't a line in there. Curious if that's something that you're considering or not.
Well, thank you for your question, and I have seen the letter from Premier Notley that was sent to the Prime Minister and recognize the situation that Alberta is in. The request was for additional train capacity to move. As you know, at the moment, oil by train is approaching 300,000 barrels a day, and there was a demand for an additional capability for an additional 120,000 barrels. We're looking at that, but the situation is the following. It is something that can be worked out with the railways, and most of the tanker cars themselves are owned either by the oil companies or by shippers. They're not primarily owned by the railways, although the railways provide the locomotives to move things. It is something that is a possibility if the government, if a deal is done on a commercial basis with the railways. At the same time, as I mentioned a little bit earlier on, we do want to make sure that we move our grain and other products as well. So it's a balancing act that needs to be accomplished, but I am definitely aware of Alberta's desire to move more until we can have more pipeline capacity.
Well, and speaking of pipeline capacity, it appears to be that you're picking up my colleague's line of questioning. You appear to be losing the argument on that one with Minister McKenna as well. We've heard from a number of stakeholders at this committee through our travel across the country that initiatives like the carbon tax are detrimental to their competitive nature. Are these things that you're bringing up in cabinet, that you're hearing these same issues from the stakeholders that you're meeting with?
Well, you won't be surprised that I don't necessarily share your assessment of the situation, and as I've said, as my government has said many times before.
To be clear, Minister, have you or have you not heard that the carbon tax is detrimental to competitiveness?
No, I have not.
You haven't heard that from?
No, I have not.
No stakeholder.
No, except for the Conservative Party making allegations.
Wow. That's fantastic.
No, because I think most Canadians are enlightened and realize that there is a cost associated with pollution, and we believe in Canada that it is possible to actually advance the economy and also be responsible.
You're exempting the largest emitters, and I believe the parliamentary secretary even admitted in a question period the other day that it is chasing investment away. So how can you sit here today and say that you haven't heard from anybody that's telling you that the carbon tax is making it uncompetitive to do business here in Canada? I invite you to just look at the protest that happened in Alberta. 1,000 people in the streets of Calgary saying that those exact same things, that they're unemployed. These are the families and before Christmas time that are directly blaming initiatives like the carbon tax and initiatives like your tanker moratorium initiatives that continue to drive business out of this country. And you're sitting here today and telling us that nobody has told you that the carbon tax is detrimental to the business.
You know, you weren't here 3 years ago. I was when the previous government.
I'm glad you follow my political career
when
so
the
closely,
previous
Minister.
government was in place, and they didn't do anything. They had this fancy thing called a sectorial approach, which they never did anything with.
So Catherine McKenna
let me
is
finish.
essentially
There were
giving
two
you your talking
provinces,
points,
British
Minister.
Columbia and Quebec, that did show some leadership with respect to putting a price on pollution. And if you look at their economies today, you would have to come to the realization that it didn't harm them. It actually made the situation
you're exempting
better.
the largest
and
emitters,
so your
Minister.
facts are not facts. They're erroneous assumptions on your part, because those economies that have embraced both a responsible approach to pollution and their economy are actually doing much better.
Okay, thank you all very much. On to Ms. Benson for 3 minutes.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And Minister, I would ask if you could table with this committee the sort of more information about the mandate of the working group that is going to look at transportation in Western Canada because Greyhound has closed. You referred to it. And sort of what kind of representation. I want to encourage you to have regional representation, what the timeline is, like what is the outcome intended to be on that working group. And also I would like to encourage that working group to look at service and safety standards when it comes to bus transportation. And I would like to raise with you, Minister, I have heard from people in my province about some of the bus services up and operating in Western Canada. They're dropping people on the side of a highway. And that is not safe, and I know that you would agree with that. So I'm wondering also if you could let us know what Indigenous communities have come forward with proposals to offer bus service to their communities or surrounding communities.
Well, you asked a lot of questions there. I don't know if we're going to be able to do all of them. My deputy minister will talk about the working group. I can talk about safety. With respect to any dialogue with Indigenous groups, we can get back to you on the information there. That's being led by ISED and IS, Indigenous Services Canada. So we can get back to you on that. The deputy minister.
Thank you, Minister. As the Minister indicated, he tasked me to work with our provincial colleagues, transportation colleagues, in developing the immediate measures that were put in place on the day that Greyhound closed down in terms of the transition of bus services. And we were also tasked by our ministers to begin work on the future of transportation in the long term. And at this point, the focus, the overriding focus of the work has been on the immediate challenge and that transition. And so that has consumed most of the working group effort. We are now that we've done that, we are transitioning and we're beginning a conversation for how we will work together in developing the long-term agenda and how we will engage the key communities in those issues. And you will see that coming out in the coming months.
Would the working group be working with the fact that if you're moving on to the next step, what about communities that don't have any bus service?
And I think that that is exactly the kind of question that we'll be working through and seeking, looking at the challenges that communities are facing and looking at the challenge that different members in the communities are facing, particularly those that have barriers to transportation, whether they're because they don't drive, whether they have mobility issues, etc. And so, I'll be frank, we haven't just begun that conversation of how to move that work ahead, because we have been really focused on the short-term challenge and addressing that.
Would it be possible to table that with the committee, what work you've done to date, who's on that committee? Because I've had a really sort of hard time getting any information to find out what exactly is going on since the announcement in July?
So at this point, that committee is really the deputy ministers of, there's a committee called the Deputy Ministers of Transportation, and that there's a subcommittee of working officials under that. The membership is myself and my colleagues in provincial transport ministries from across Canada. And essentially that is the membership right now. We do see, we are building a work program that will include engagement, and the development of that work plan is underway. With respect to the engagement with Indigenous communities, if you permit me, Minister, we have colleagues here from Indigenous Services Canada and CIRNA that they may wish to comment on the discussion and the engagement with Indigenous communities in terms of supporting them in developing transportation services.
Yeah, so I'd be happy to do that. So we have been engaging and reaching out to national and regional Indigenous organizations leadership over the last number of months. They're interested in the idea of Indigenous-led business solutions. We have not had active interest in pursuing that in terms of proposals at this point in time. We are striking a working group with the Canadian Council of Aboriginal Business, the National Association of Capital Corporations, NWAC, and others to work with regional and national Indigenous organizations to try to scope out where there might be interest. It's early days, but that we intend to do that work over the next couple of months. And if businesses come forward, and there are probably tourism companies that are already in the business of transportation that might be interested, that we will then work with those Indigenous businesses or communities to look at solutions.
Thank you very much. On to Ms. Block for 5 minutes.
Thank you very much, Madam Speaker. Transport Canada is requesting close to $10.4 million in funding in these estimates. That's a combination of votes 1A, 5A, plus and 15A, and includes contributions to support the participation of Indigenous groups in the navigation protection system and to establish Indigenous advisory groups. Minister, your government is already facing a lawsuit from the Lax Kw'alaam Indian Band as a result of a lack of consultation prior to the introduction of Bill C-48. As is widely known but swept under the carpet is the fact that we heard again in committee last Tuesday from witnesses that American environmental groups funnel money to Canadian organizations to oppose resource development and the expansion of pipeline capacity in Canada. These same groups had much to do with your government's decision, probably had much to do with your government's decision to introduce Bill C-48 in the first place, as there is no economic or environmental reasons to do so. In the estimates, as I've said, your department is asking for the amount of $10.4 million, and I'm wondering if you can tell us what measures will be taken to ensure that these advisory groups will not be populated or influenced by American-funded special interests.
So thank you for your question. I can tell you that these consultations are consultations with Canadian organizations and with Canadian Indigenous groups. And as you know, you mentioned in the context of C-48 that there are certain coastal nations, that First Nations, that don't agree with the government's decision on the moratorium. But you also know that there are coastal nations in British Columbia who agree 100% with the decision that has been taken. And in fact, they're providing testimony, in fact, recently to the Senate committee that is looking at C-48, where this bill currently resides. So it's an enormously complex situation, but we feel that the input from Indigenous groups is extremely important. Does it mean that it is unanimous? No. It's very difficult when we're talking about a very large number of different coastal nations or Indigenous groups in any project, including the TMX, to get unanimous consent. But we are committed to continuing to consult in a meaningful way with First Nations and where we can to try to address their concerns.
Thank you very much. And I just want to pick up on what you've just said in terms of continuing to consult. We did in fact hear during our study of C-48 from a number of Indigenous communities, and absolutely there are some that support Bill C-48 and a number that do not. However, I think what was unanimous from those individuals who provided testimony was that they had not been consulted prior to the introduction of C-48. So I would just leave that with you. I do want to pick up on the line of questioning of my colleague in regards to the carbon tax. We know that there's been an exemption provided to the air industry in the north. So obviously that's in recognition of perhaps the detrimental effects that the carbon tax will have on that industry and on the cost of operating in the north. So I'm wondering if you or your government is contemplating providing an exception to the rest of the industry across Canada.
No, that's not in our plans at the moment. We do recognize the particular circumstances of small regional and northern airlines or air transport companies, because they work on extremely small margins in very difficult situations where costs are, as we know in the north, higher in a number of areas. So we recognize that. But let me put it to you. I am really looking forward to hearing from your party on what your plan is with respect, because you have said that you are going to reach the climate targets of the Paris Accord, but you have yet to tell us how you will do it. You have got some magical, painless solution in mind, which we are dying to hear about.
Good. I'm sure you will after 2019.
Well, why can't we hear about it now?
Thank you very much, Minister Garneau. On to Mr. Hardy for 5 minutes, please.
Definitely.
Well, it has to do with, it's this magic well, and no, we'll just move on. Couple of issues, trucking and via rail. Truck drivers, the training, the fitness for operating, the oversight of trucking companies, especially the long-haul ones, would fall, into your realm of interest. Obviously, concerns have been raised after a number of high-profile incidents, but on a day-to-day basis, with the growth in trade and truck movements and just-in-time delivery and a lot of other things, what are the trends? What are you seeing, and what are we doing about it?
Well, thank you. We're doing a lot about it. We announced the implementation of electronic stability control, which is extremely important, that has to be put into trucks because it helps to minimize the possibility of rollover. That is an important piece of technology. We've also implemented regulations that will force the implementation of electronic logging devices. This is to ensure that we accurately log how many hours a driver is actually driven, because there have been proven allegations in the past that drivers suffer from fatigue when they exceed the limit on how many hours they can drive, and this leads to the possibility of accidents. So that's another area where we are making changes. Another one that recently came up, unfortunately in the tragic context of Humboldt, is the fact that, and this was in a story in the CBC, was that only one province in Canada actually has minimum entry-level training requirements before a trucker takes their test, and that is Ontario. You have to have 100 hours of training before you take your test. We think that this is something we need to implement in all of the provinces. It is a provincial jurisdiction, but it is an item that I have signaled to the provinces that we need to look at, and we will be discussing this in January. So those are initiatives there. On the trade side, We also recognize that when a truck leaves from Halifax to go to Vancouver, there are a host of different regulations as it moves through the different provinces, which have to do with dead weight on the roads themselves, with the potential use of wide-base tires. These are irritants or impediments in terms of maximizing our trade, and that is something that we want to work with the provinces on to improve the internal trade within our country.
I had a constituent drop into the office showing me his Via Rail ticket, and he actually was successful in getting at least half of that ticket reimbursed. He took a trip from Vancouver to the Yorkton-Melville region, and there were extensive delays. In one case, 7 hours as freight train after freight train were, of course, heading west with all of that trade that we value so much. Is there a strategy underway? Oh, and by the way, on his way back, he decided to forget the train and take Greyhound. He got as far as Edmonton, and they said, "That's the end of our line. I don't know about yours." So he had a hard time. But in terms of the Via Rail's travel time reliability, especially in the western provinces, in competition with freight movements, is there a strategy under development to maybe improve Via Rail's performance?
So as you point out, Via Rail mostly travels on the rail of Class 1 railways like CN and CP, and the arrangements that exist between Via and those companies are such that they have to yield for those freight trains. So on the one hand, we're delighted that there are more freight trains moving all those important goods to our ports, but there's no question it has an impact on Via, and Via is rightfully concerned and looking at that situation at the moment to see if there's a better arrangement that can come up to minimize these very long delays, which are compounded in the winter when there are difficult conditions. So it is something that is of concern, and we're looking at it, or Via Rail is looking at it. At this point, I don't have anything further to say.
Very much, Minister. On to Mr. Aubin.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you, Minister, for being here today. The last time I had a chance to see you, you were in Trois-Rivières for a meeting of the UMQ where specialists of railway transportation development had met to meet with you. I was a little bit disappointed by your speech. The subject was important, but you concentrated mostly on railway safety, whereas we would have liked to hear you on your vision for the development of the railway network. For example, broadening passenger rail service, possible accommodations with the Government of Quebec when it comes to electrification of transportation. So please allow that I will restate the wish of the representatives of UMQ who wanted to know if the high-frequency train project by Via Rail will be implemented under your government now, or is this going to be subject to a future election campaign? Thank you for your question. I know that you're following this file very closely, and it's not surprising. You're from Trois-Rivières, and one of the things that we're looking at is the high-frequency train in the Quebec-Montreal corridor, which would go through Trois-Rivières. During my lovely day in Trois-Rivières, where I spoke to many different fora, we're at an advanced stage of our study. I'm wondering if maybe you could at least give us a timeline, an announcement in a week, a month before Christmas, before the election. I know that you are impatiently waiting for it, Mr. Aubin. I know that you would like an answer tomorrow, but as a government, we have responsibilities. We're talking about a commitment that could be very significant for taxpayers' contributions. A great deal will be spent by taxpayers on such a project, and so we need to determine what is the viability of such a service. I understand that I'm not going to get an answer this morning, Well, we have to do our homework, and that's what we're doing. When it comes to taxpayer money, you're opening the door to the next question. There is a persistent rumor that the contract to renew Via Rail's fleet will be granted to a German company. They would build the trains in the United States, but the engineering would be done in Germany for about $1 billion of public funds. We're not looking at any Canadian spin-offs, no guarantee to maintain or develop jobs in Canada. It seems problematic to me. Do you not think that the contracts where we give public funds would allow you, like many other countries, to guarantee in those contracts a percentage of Canadian content? For example, when renewing the fleet of Via Rail's cars. I'm sure that you understand that I can't comment on rumors, but I can tell you that a year ago when I announced that Via was going to replace its fleet, and as you know, this is a Crown corporation, and was going to conduct a competition to find the right company. Once again, I mentioned that what was important was performance and price in order to spend taxpayer money correctly. So you're telling me that a competition includes, or rather excludes, Canadian content? I'm getting there. That's something that is led by Via, but I would say at the same time we're ensuring transparency in the project. But they are the ones making the decision. They are the experts. I also announced at that point, I know that your party is not in favor of free trade agreements, but we have an obligation when we conduct a federal level competition. It's not the same as at the provincial level. We have to open that to everyone. And we can't include clauses that, when we conduct a project like this, that favors Canadian companies. It would not be respectful of our commitments, and that it goes both ways. That means we have to keep our commitments because we're a country that believes in free trade with the rest of the world, that wants to trade with the rest of the world. That means it's not something that we can include a condition of a percentage of Canadian content. We expect to see some treaties, but we can't make any announcements.
Chair, and I do want to state the fact that we do look forward to seeing the infrastructure minister coming here on December 6th, and I'm sure that discussion can then be continued with Mr. Champagne. Secondly, I do want to take this opportunity to thank the committee for especially our Liberal colleagues, as well as Mr. Genereux, Mr. Lippert, Mr. Oban of the Conservative and NDP party for coming down to Niagara and recognizing the Niagara-Hamilton Trade Corridor and, of course, the assets that are attached to the same. We are within a one-day's drive of over 44% of North America's annual income. New York, Baltimore, Washington, Philadelphia, Pittsburgh, in the Ohio area, Cleveland, over to Toledo, as well as Detroit, Chicago, Indiana, and of course back into Ontario with the GTA and Montreal. And with that, how robust it has, continues to be, and will be, especially with the investments that we're looking at making within that trade corridor. So with that, Madam Chair, I do want to ask the Minister that with all the work that's being done with all the partners throughout Niagara-Hamilton, some of the investments that are being made, including the one you announced Saturday in Hamilton, what are your expectations for us as we work within that team down in Niagara-Hamilton with respect to strengthening our Niagara-Hamilton trade corridor?
Well, thank you for your question, Mr. Badaway. I think that there is a strong potential in the Niagara Peninsula to, because we're talking about a very large density of population in Canada that is in that area, and there is a great deal of trade that is done not only by truck crossing the border, but also by the use of the St. Lawrence Seaway, which is something that we feel is at the moment underexploited. So there's tremendous potential in that area, and there is I think growth potential with respect to port activity, with respect to the seaway activity, and with respect to trade corridors that are on land. And I would hope that we can continue to work with your implication and those of your colleagues to identify where we can spend money wisely to grow that capability. At the same time, always, of course, taking into account that, you know, we have to look at all the other factors like the environment and things like that. But I think there is potential there that has not been exploited. We were delighted to make that announcement at the Port of Hamilton, which I think is good news for the Port of Hamilton, and I congratulate them on their forward-looking vision in terms of growth.
Thank you. Mr. Graham, do you have a very short question?
No. Okay, if you want me to, I can. There's one topic that I would like to bring up. It's a good way to finish the meeting. There are a number of companies working on flying cars around the world. I'm wondering if we're doing anything at Transport to think about the regulations required to allow that to actually happen.
It's a very good question. In fact, I was visited a while back by a company that makes a flying car. It sounds like a glib expression, a flying car, but I actually saw the video demonstration. Yeah. I saw the video demonstration of it, and it was very impressive. It was electrical too. So this is something that, of course, has to be looked at from a regulatory point of view, not only from a safety point of view, but if suddenly people, let's say in Orleans, decide they want to come in to work here in downtown Ottawa, and you have all of these flying cars that we're looking into the future here coming in, as we see in science fiction movies all the time, then there's an important safety component to it, and it would be not only provincial, federal, but also there would be provincial and municipal. Traditionally, provincially, the enforcement of the rules of the road, in this case the rules of the air, would play a significant role. So it is something that is on not just science fiction, it is something that is coming through.
Okay,
Madam President, if I could just finish by saying there are 67 projects in Mississauga for over $97 million.
We would appreciate that if it could be submitted to the committee. We have 1 minute left, and Mr. Liepert has a question before. I know the minister has to go to a cabinet meeting,
right,
so
and
we've got 1 minute before
I just wanted to conclude, if I could, by tying a bow around this Liberal environmental plan. So, your words, we exempt the small airlines from a carbon tax because their profit margins are slim. We'll put a carbon tax on the large airlines. We'll also put a carbon tax on small business, even though their profits are slim, but we'll exempt 90% of large emitters because, in the words of the Parliamentary Secretary, they'd leave Canada if we put a carbon tax on because it would be a job killer. And then we use Stephen Harper's emissions target. So that's the Liberal environmental plan as I can see it, so that doesn't scare me very much. But what does scare me is, I'd like to know if you or your department, as part of the discussion leading up to the carbon tax, did an impact assessment on what a carbon tax would do to the transportation and business community relying on transportation. And if you did, would you table it with this committee? And if you did not, will you admit that you just rolled over and played dead to the Environment Minister, who's running energy, who's running transportation, and who's running this government today?
Thank you, Mr. Liepert.
So, Mr. Liepert, I know you're trying to make a point here, but I will also have to say the only thing that Mr. Harper had was some numbers. He actually didn't have a plan.
Targets. Didn't have a plan.
Give the minister the opportunity to answer,
and I would urge you again to provide that plan.
Please.
And secondly, on airlines, there are two components. One is internal, where we're talking about a price on pollution, but there is also the international component, which is done through ICAO, and where Canada has taken a significant lead, because when we're talking about international travel, it's not under the Canadian budget for greenhouse gases. And Canada has taken a lead there because a lot of travel, 2% of greenhouse gases on the planet, come from international air travel. And there, I'm very proud of the role that Canada has taken with sign-on by other nations to take a responsibility for the production of greenhouse gases.
Thank you very much, Minister Garneau, especially for giving us 90 minutes of your time along with your officials. I know you have to go to a cabinet meeting, so please feel free to leave at this point. I will now move on to the votes that we all have to deal with. So I will read these out. Pursuant to Standing Order 81-5, the committee will now dispose of the supplementary estimates A for the fiscal year ending March 31st, 2019 under Transport Canada, namely Vote 1A under Canadian Air Transport Security Authority, Vote 1A under Canadian Transportation Agencies, and votes 1A, 5A, 10A, 15A, and 20A under Department of Transport. Do I have unanimous consent to deal with all the votes in one motion? All right, thank you. So shall all the votes under the Canadian Air Transport Security Authority, the Canadian Transportation Agency, and the Department of Transport carry? All those in favor? On division. Shall I report these votes to the House?
Yes.
Yes. Thank you all very much. We will now suspend for a few minutes while the departmental officials thank you all for being here, and that we can have our other witnesses come to the table. Meeting back to order. Pursuant to Standing Order 1082, we are doing a study of assessing the impact of aircraft noise in the vicinity of major Canadian airports. So welcome to the witnesses. Thank you for being here. At least the weather cooperated enough to get you here. Whether you'll get home or not, who knows, but at least you got here, right? So from Halton Region, we have Jeff Knoll, Regional Councillor from the town of Oakville and the Regional Municipality of Halton. Welcome, Jeff. And from the Greater Toronto Airports Authority, we have Hilary Marshall, Vice President, Stakeholder Relations and Communications, Michael Belanger, Director, Aviation Programs and Compliance, and Robin Connolly, Director, Community Relations. And from the Toronto Airport Noise Group, we have Renee Jacobi, the founding chair, and Sandra Best, the current chair. So welcome to all of you. Mr. Knoll, we'll start with you. Please limit your comments to no more than 5 minutes because the committee always has lots of questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for the opportunity to appear before you at this standing committee today. My name is Jeff Knoll, and I appear as a long-standing member of the ward of the Town of Oakville and Regional Councillors representing the people of Ward 5. I also serve as the Halton appointee on the GTAA Community Environment and Noise Advisory Committee, known as CNAC. Through my work on this committee, I am highly engaged on the issue of aircraft noise and the resulting impacts on the residents of Halton. As you may know, Halton Region is comprised of the City of Burlington and the towns of Halton Hills, Oakville, and Milton. We are a growing community with a population of over 548,000 people, located a mere 15 kilometres to the west of Toronto Pearson Airport. Now, we acknowledge Pearson's role as an economic engine and the international gateway that links Canadians to the world stage. Each day, thousands of Halton residents travel to Pearson to go to work and to travel for business and pleasure. However, as an elected municipal official whose constituency is deeply affected by aircraft noise, I am here before you to contend that we have not achieved the proper balance between the ongoing operations of Pearson, its future growth plans, and the resulting impacts on Halton residents. I further contend that aircraft noise is highly detrimental to the well-being of Halton residents. I hear this consistently from my residents in my ward and throughout the region. Recently, as I knocked on doors and spoke to my constituents during this fall's municipal election, we often had to pause our conversations as aircraft shrieked overhead. No other words were necessary at that point because one of the key issues in my ward was flying right above us. Some might say that these residents should have considered this when choosing to live in a community under a flight path. In the case of North Oakville, it was not on a flight path until merely 6 years ago. The changes to the downwind leg, the incessant low and slow overflights, and the resulting noise and nuisance were imposed on these established neighbourhoods as a result of NAV Canada's 2012 flight path changes. Changes, I might add, were made with no consultation and virtually no notice. I should note that the noise complaints that elected officials are receiving are coming from all across the Halton community. Recently, I was invited to speak at an aircraft noise meeting in Milton. We watched incredulously as one aircraft after another flew over and shook the little community centre to make a final noisy descent into the airport, as if to punctuate the very purpose of the gathering. Aircraft noise in Halton is disrupting the ability of our residents to go outside and use their backyards, to enjoy our parks and our hiking trails, to talk with their neighbours, to get a full night's sleep. In short, aircraft noise is compromising our residents' quality of life. Now, I must acknowledge that there have been some positive engagement on this issue over the past few years, including 3 major studies by the GTAA and NAV Canada. However, while appreciative of this engagement, residents are not satisfied with the pace of implementation of the proposed mitigating measures coming out of these studies. Residents want and need relief today, especially as the airport looks to become a super hub to serve a projected 85 million passengers in 2037, up from 47 million today. Now, my time today is very limited, so I will submit additional written comments and suggestions to your committee, but I want to raise one last issue before I conclude. The GTAA is engaged with regional airports in Southern Ontario with the objective of solidifying Pearson's role as the main international hub, with regional airports providing complementary passenger and cargo services. While a potentially positive goal, it does raise questions of whether the proper jurisdictional partners, accountability structure, and incentives are in place to ensure that the GTAA adequately brings aircraft noise into the equation along with Pearson's economic interests. We need the engagement of all levels of government, potentially with Transport Canada playing a lead role to help in the long-term planning and routing amongst airports in Southern Ontario. a process that needs to focus on a triple bottom line of social responsibility, economic value, and environmental impact. Furthermore, I would like to suggest that it is time for the government to consider a second major airport in the GTAA, potentially making use of the Pickering lands that were assembled for this very purpose over 50 years ago. Such an initiative would spread the aircraft and vehicular traffic as well as the economic development benefits to the eastern GTA. Madam Chair, as elected officials, we are constantly challenged to find the proper balance between sometimes inherently opposite interests. In the case of Toronto Pearson, Canada's largest airport and the surrounding communities, we're in a situation where we're not achieving the balance between the economic imperatives of Pearson and the impacts of aircraft noise on our community. If we can't achieve that balance, then we're at a real risk of seeing the continued and permanent erosion of the quality of life in Halton and across Canada, a prospect that does not serve the interests of governments at any level. Thank you for my time.
Thank you very much, Mr. Noel. On to Ms. Marshall for 5 minutes, please.
Madam Chair, committee members. Good morning. I'm Hilary Marshall, Vice President of Stakeholder Relations and Communications for the GTAA. With me is Robin Connolly, the Director of Community Relations. Her office manages noise programs, and Mike Belanger, Director of Aviation Programs and Compliance. Thanks for the opportunity to present today and for the work the committee is undertaking to understand the impact of noise. The GTAA shares this goal. Toronto Pearson is working towards a bold vision, to be the best airport in the world. Today, we're the 5th most connected airport in the world and play a vital role in connecting Canadian cities to each other and the world. 1 in 5 Canadians uses Toronto Pearson for air travel today. Because of our connectivity, we believe that being the best airport in the world starts closer to home, working hand in hand with our community and lockstep with our aviation partners and industry experts. Today, I'd like to tell you about a few of the initiatives we've developed in collaboration with our community and industry partners. Every 5 years, we develop a noise management action plan which lays out how we will address noise over a 5-year cycle. In our previous noise management action plan, we accomplished the following: removing the 10 nautical mile boundary that limited where we would accept noise complaints from. This initiative in particular was pushed for by Councillor Noel of Oakville, who you just heard from, and he also pushed to expand the committee membership to include the regions of York, Durham, and Halton. We also undertook a review of locations of our system of noise monitoring terminals and added 8 more noise monitoring terminals for a total of 25. Our 2018 to 2022 Noise Management Action Plan is even more ambitious. It has 10 commitments that will make Toronto Pearson a leader in aviation noise management. We created this plan following an international best practices study of 26 comparator airports around the world. The study was conducted for us by Helios, who you will hear from at a later date, I understand. Additionally, we engaged more than 3,000 residents to help shape the plan by giving us their input through workshops, and we assembled a resident-led reference panel specifically to provide input on noise and airport growth. This plan has been well received by the community and resident groups, and we're now taking action to implement the plan. As part of our implementation, we're continuing to update our community and resident partners as well as our elected officials. A key initiative of our plan is the Quieter Fleet Incentive Program, which targets noise from aircraft. The A320 family of aircraft has a high-pitched whine related to air intake. This can be eliminated with a simple retrofit. Airlines around the world, such as Lufthansa, Air France, British Airways, and EasyJet, have already made this change. And we've written and engaged with our carriers to ask for their support and to advise them that we are moving ahead with an incentive program in 2020. We continue to work with our airline partners to make this happen as soon as possible. In 2015, we started working with NAVCAN to develop what has become known as the 6 Ideas, specifically designed to reduce noise on our adjacent communities. A description of these 6 ideas has been provided to you, but I'd like to take a moment to highlight a few of them. Ideas 1 and 2 were implemented on November 8th by NAV Canada. These are new nighttime flight paths for approaching and departing aircraft. Idea 5, which involves alternating east and west runway use on weekends to provide some predictable respite for communities on the final approach or initial departures. This program was tested during this past summer, and we're examining the results and look forward to making those results public shortly. Following the guidelines of the Airspace Change Communications and Consultation Protocol, our community partners were involved at every stage of this 3-year study. In the last year alone, we reached out to 2.9 million residents via print ads, had 250,000 online views, connected with 160,000 people by phone, and about 1,000 people participated directly in surveys. We also met with elected officials throughout the process to ensure they had information to respond to community questions and concerns. We're seeing positive impacts and also a positive response from the community. In addition to working with our community and industry partners, we've also engaged with experts in the field of noise management and annoyance to guide our work. We're working with the University of Windsor to understand noise annoyance. The committee heard earlier from Professor Novak and PhD student Julia Jodovic. We are supporting their research to better understand how the community experiences noise effects and how we can work better to mitigate that. We also engaged Helios to be our technical consultants on the delivery of our 5-year noise management action plan. Their role is to help us ensure that we're finding responsible and innovative solutions based on international best practices. In closing, Toronto Pearson is continually looking for ways to manage our noise and annoyance. We do this by balancing our commitment to our neighbours with the pursuit of our vision of making Toronto Pearson the best airport in the world. In 2017, we served more than 47 million passengers and directly employed nearly 50,000 people at our airport. We have the second largest employment zone in the country, and the airport facilitates more than 6% of Ontario's GDP. Toronto Pearson's growth is important to future jobs and economic development. We know that cannot be done without the help of our neighbours and partners. We're working hard to find a way that we can all grow and prosper together. Thanks again for the opportunity to represent the airport, and I look forward to your questions.
Very much.
Finding fair, safe and equitable solutions. I live in High Park, Toronto, and my colleague lives in Midtown Toronto. So you're probably asking yourselves, why are we addressing your committee? Well, we are here to dispel the myth that aviation noise neighbourhood as far as 20k from the airport to the torturous sound of low-altitude airplanes deploying their flaps and screeching their brakes directly overhead. It's not annoyance. Okay. You call the airport and learn from the Noise Management Office that you now live under what we at Tang affectionately term a superhighway in the sky. And you can't register a noise complaint because you live outside the radius for reporting. Even with improvements made to date, residents are fatigued and many have simply given up on using the process. Imagine the shock you feel when you find out that there was a little or no consultation and your elected representatives knew nothing about it. From no aircraft one day to more than 88,000 flights per year in 2017 on our runway alone. And this does not include either arrivals, crossing en route to other runways, or departures. The data in our briefing materials speak for themselves. High flight volumes, high noise monitor readings, and disproportionate runway utilization. You are further shocked when you become aware of the deregulation of our air navigation services to NAV Canada in 1996, a private company. There was no legislative protocol to challenge the decision made in 2012, and being asked to attend ineffective Community Engagement and Noise Advisory Committee meetings, CNAC, to solve problems at the local level yielded no meaningful change. So what's been achieved to date? A voluntary communications and consultation protocol, June 2015, that we believe must be amended and legislated. The Helios report, the independent Toronto airspace review. We commend NAV Canada for commissioning in it, as it has built bridges with stakeholders and created dialogue and discussion. We support much of the work carried out by Helios and collaborated with them throughout the process. However, we were disappointed that the GTAA, in an attempt to appear more consultative, formed a widely panned reference review panel and deferred better runway utilization, amongst other things, to them. Also recommended was the restructuring of CNAC, and we understand that the GTA is about to unveil their new look next month. Now, we haven't been privy to the deliberations involved, but we are cautiously optimistic about the results. When Tang first engaged with both the GTA and NAV Canada, public relations were atrocious. Concerns were summarily dismissed and information difficult to obtain. It was very clear that airlines were the customers and citizens living under aviation routes were an afterthought. We have seen positive changes within NAV Canada in the last 2 years and more willingness to work with community groups. In particular, we commend Blake Cushney for his commitment to the process. However, these changes did not come voluntarily, but as the result of years of hard work and lobbying by members of the general public. Therefore, we continue to believe that consistent, active and objective government oversight of NAV Canada is critical. There is still much to be done. Pearson projections estimate in excess of 600,000 total movements by 2037, which means arrivals on our runway alone would increase to a staggering 120,000 per year. Clearly, this is untenable. Our recommendations are in your briefing materials, and we ask that you take these into consideration. In particular, we ask for acceleration of the retrofit of the Airbus A320s and the adoption of Helios recommendations with regard to night flights. We believe that Toronto is one of the great livable cities of the world, and we support its economic development. However, as Canadians, we pride ourselves in our belief in justice and fairness, and it is neither just nor fair to ask some communities to bear the burden of concentrated aviation noise while absolving others. Solutions simply must be found. We invite your questions, and we look forward to the results and recommendations of the study and the Minister's response. Thank you again for this opportunity. It's deeply appreciated.
Thank you very much. On to Ms. Block for 5 minutes.
5 minutes? Okay. Thank you very much, Madam Chair. My first question will be for Tang. I'm wondering if you could tell me if your organization has developed a proposal for how airport authorities should balance the concerns of communities surrounding night flights with the economic benefits offered by these flights.
I'd be happy to answer that question. I'd like for the committee to know that we have been involved in the aviation noise issue for the last 7 years, and it is a temptation at the beginning of the process to chase headlines that invite solutions that we think might be beneficial to us. I can use an example the Frankfurt Airport, which is often referred to with regard to its curfew at night. You'll hear as many positive things about the night curfew. You'll hear equally negative things about it. Can you not hear me?
I can hear you. I'm just wondering if you've put together a proposal.
Our proposal is to support what the Helios report has recommended in their best practices noise management, and that would be to extend the night flight restricted hours and to form a new formula for the night flight cap.
Thank you very much. In the spirit of Tuesday giving and the number of colleagues on the other side of the table, I would like to give the rest of my time to one of those members if you have any questions.
Thank you. Boy, that's one. That's why I love this committee. Everybody's so kind to each other. All right, so we've got 4 minutes here almost. If one of the members, okay, Boris, Reef.
Thank you so much, Ms. Block, and Merry Christmas to you as well. Ms. Marshall, in June 2013, Transport Canada increased the GTA's budget for night flights with a formula that would continue increasing the number of night flights in future years. Did the GTA lobby government officials for this change?
Thanks for your question. We undertook extensive consultation and engaged with government officials in the process.
Could you provide us a list? So I'm asking for an undertaking, a list of who was lobbied and by whom. So which department officials and which elected officials?
The consultation documents are posted on our website, and we'd be happy to provide a link to that website. It's fully recorded.
And on that same topic, was the minister lobbied on this particular night flight request?
I'd have to go back through the documents, but I mean, Transport Canada approved the change, so...
So you would undertake to provide us
Yes.
all the information that you have. Thank you.
Happy to.
I was glad to hear you state that you work, and this is your quote, hand in hand with our communities. Unfortunately, that wasn't reflected in the opening statement that we heard from one community group. I know that's not the feeling in our community. And let me zero in on CNAC. There's great community dissatisfaction with CNAC. It's seen as a vehicle to manage and deal with complaints and not actually address the issues. Would you, after going through all these processes, support an arm's length noise committee beyond the control and perceived manipulations of the GTAA?
I think what you'll find is in the coming months we'll be coming forward with a new proposal for CNAC. We've looked at other airports, as I indicated, internationally to understand how they've approached it and found some great initiatives in terms of industry partnerships. So we'll be coming back with those.
Okay, my question is, do you support an arm's length noise committee that would deal with these issues? So an arm's length so that the perceived control and manipulations that the GTAA has over this process would no longer be the reality that communities live with. Do you support an arm's length noise committee?
Right. The new CNAC, the new approach that we're going to be coming forward with has industry partnerships. It's got more direct community outreach, government outreach, and we think that's a good first step. That's the step we're going to be moving forward with.
So you're not comfortable with a fully arm's length noise committee to oversee noise complaints?
We think that this approach is a good first step, and we look forward to bringing it forward to discuss with members of the community.
Members of the community, thank you.
Ms. Dam.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you to all the witnesses for being here. In particular, I want to thank my former colleague, Jeff Knoll. We served together on council, and I know that you've been engaged in this issue for many, many years, and well, since 2012 when the flight paths were changed, and have seen some positive steps over the last few years. There's been a number of multiple studies and technical reviews that have been done by NAV Canada, the GTAA, Helios Consulting. I had arranged for them to do one of the consultations in Oakville, North Burlington. Community members have been engaged, in particular David Inch and Richard Slater from our riding. My riding, your ward. But I'm wondering, in all of that, what increased role or what role should the federal government be playing? Because we're talking about arm's length agencies here. So how do you see us becoming engaged to ensure that there's pilot studies that are being done right now? And I'm just wondering if you could comment a little further on that.
I'd be happy to, and thank you for the question, Ms. DeMoth, and I appreciate my Member of Parliament asking me a question. Well, there's a couple of things here. First of all, I acknowledged in my presentation that there have been these studies, and there's been some good work and some great recommendations coming out of them. As my friends from Tang had indicated earlier, there are a number of there's a number of initiatives left on the cutting room floor, to use a film term, that need to be embraced, specifically the night flight restrictions, the restructuring of the Noise Advisory Committee, which, of course, is apparently in process, and I understand that it is about to be announced. But I think to get directly to your question, what could the government be directly involved in, I think is potentially taking back some of the responsibility from NAV Canada in terms of addressing these issues. NAV Canada is an independent agency, and I understand the formation of an independent organization to deal with difficult issues and difficult decisions. Certainly those issues around safety are paramount and need to be kept at arm's length, because safety should never be a political or a neighborhood decision. But certainly issues around quality of life, the impact of operations of any federally regulated service or organization need to be taken into account in decision making. So I would urge your committee to consider changing the terms of reference for NAV Canada so that there can be more direct involvement by the government and the people's representatives in some of those decisions. Because while we have some terrific ideas, you know, on the back burner and things that are working, they're not moving fast enough, and there's not enough teeth to make them happen quickly enough. GTAA is certainly doing their level best, but there needs to be more involvement by both NAV Canada and Transport Canada. I understand you asked a question earlier today about Air Canada. That's a great example. You know, big flurry about the announcement, press release, everybody was very happy, but the implementation of the retrofit of the air vortex noise generators is happening at a molasses-like rate. So getting involved in basically having NAV Canada take a more direct role in you know, considering community impacts needs to happen. And the last thing, of course, I mentioned in my comments, and I want to reemphasize it because I don't think that I want this, you know, I don't want to see this ignored, and that is thinking beyond. Those of us who are elected, sometimes we have to think in terms of what we can accomplish in our term. We need to think of a multi-term solution to this, and that is potentially a second airport. Most major jurisdictions around the world have multiple airports in their jurisdictions. The federal government, in their wisdom of the day 50 years ago, assembled lands for that purpose. It's the time to dust them off and to start actually moving in that direction.
Thank you, Councillor Knoll. The growth of Pearson is something that I know Oakville Council and the region of Halton have been quite engaged in, and you've had delegations to both councils. Do you see a role for the Minister and the Department of Transportation in that growth, or should there be some engagement by the Minister in the growth of the airport?
Well, once again, I think I go back to my previous question, or my previous responses. First of all, I think the answer to that is absolutely yes. I agree, and I said this in my statement, I fully acknowledge and respect and appreciate the economic contributions made by Pearson and the GTA organization. However, there is a disconnect between the ambitions and the desires of the board of the GTAA to serve more and more customers and the impacts on the ground. And I do believe that the federal government, as the people's representatives with this in their jurisdiction, need to be taking a direct role in this, because it is having as I stated, it is having a deleterious impact to the quality of life of surrounding communities. I mean, once upon a time, the airport was built in an area where there was nobody around it. It was built in the middle of a farmer's field, essentially, in Malton. But those times have changed, and so the impacts of what takes place at the airport needs to be considered in the context of the people that live directly, whether it's directly in connection to whether it's an adjacent community or like my friends from Tang in Midtown Toronto.
Thank you very much. On to Mr. Aubin for 5.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair, and thank you to all of the guests for being with us today. My first question is for Ms. Best, Ms. Jacoby, and Mr. Knoll. From the beginning of this study, there's no doubt in my mind that when we meet with witnesses that are being impacted by noise caused by aircraft, it's extremely disruptive. But it seems that we still can't seem to demonstrate to me what airport standard and what citizens group could agree on. All I found is the 55 decibel medium recognized by the OMS and the OACI, which should be the ceiling, about 55 decibels. We all know, however, that the noise goes well beyond these 55 decibel. When it comes to airport groups and citizens groups, can you agree on the recognition of the instruments we use to measure to ensure that all of that information is submitted in order to be discussed? Or once again, would it be up to Transport Canada to make all of the data more accessible and transparent in order to be able to have a conversation that is set on the same base?
Yes, I think that's a very valid question. Thank you. I think the issue is that we all face at the moment is that because GTAA is a private company and NAVCAN is a private company, there is no freedom of information involved. And therefore, we cannot see how decisions are made, and so we cannot understand how they're trying to do things. So in terms of the decibel levels, there has to be some clarity around that. There has to be some agreement between everyone what that looks like. But more importantly, when we speak with pilots, when we do our research, what we find is there are two kinds of aircraft noise. There is the noise when you're coming down to land. There's not much you can do about that. You're coming into land as an aircraft. But there is a lot you can do about the downwind, which is the initial descent before you turn. And so I think within that, there are discussions that can be had about decibel levels. There are agreements that can be made. Planes can fly quieter. They can fly higher. Some of that's been undertaken already. But the decibel issue itself is a massive problem worldwide, and there is no agreement I think you're going to find anywhere in airports. You know, it's not happening.
Merci. Vous souhaitez ajouter quelque chose?
Thank you. Would you like to add anything?
Sure, I'd be happy to jump in. I think that strictly measuring impacts on a scientific metric like noise compression rates, decibel rates, is not the only consideration. The accepted standards do not necessarily take into account concentration. For example, 55 decibels once every 20 minutes may be an acceptable standard, but 55 decibels or 45 decibels or any metric on a consistent, concentrated basis leads to a level of frustration and annoyance that is very hard to measure by science. It is simply, it's a, like I said in my opening statement, it's an issue of quality of life. It's when you are constantly bombarded with sound, whether it meets a certain standard or not, it's going to have an impact on your ability to be able to conduct your daily activities, your sleep, your well-being.
Merci. Prochaine question est pour vous, Madame.
Thank you. My next question is for you, Ms. Marshall. In the final report of the independent report Helios, there were short-term recommendations that were intended to present best practices to reduce noise. In your preliminary statement, you talked about 10 commitments that the Pearson Airport was going to make. Is there any relationship between the recommendations? Otherwise, if not, how do you perceive the Helios report?
Is there any relationship in between the 10 recommendations? So the recommendations taken together, whether it's insulation, a quieter fleet incentive program, changes in reporting, changes in the noise committee, all factors taken together, we believe, should help us to move forward towards international best practices in airport noise management. Did I understand your question properly?
Oui.
Okay.
Merci. Et ces 10...
Yes, thank you. And those 10 recommendations, will they be available soon?
Available and they're posted on our website, as well as short, medium, and long-term actions that we're undertaking towards each of them.
Ms. Marshall, can we ensure that the committee gets a copy of
Yes.
of that report, please? Thank you. On to Mr. Sican and then Ms. Ratansi.
Thank you, Madam Chair. My question will be for the GTAA. I'll start by saying I really do appreciate the engagement I've had with you. I've had 2 people from my constituency actually participate in the public consultation, and I've also enjoyed speaking to you about potentially making Pearson a Mississauga transit hub. Having said that, there's been estimates of Pearson expanding to 80 to 90 million people by 2030, I believe. Okay. What do you think, what is 100% capacity for Pearson then?
Well, I guess you'd have to. I'd just take a step back and try to explain that airports are, we have a certain number of runways at Toronto Pearson. We have 5 runways, and we are able to operate them in such a way that as planes get larger and they're carrying more passengers, it increases significantly the number of passengers coming through an airport, but the number of movements themselves.
Sorry, just because I have limited time. There must be a number, though. You can't indefinitely continue to have planes coming in.
Well, right now we're looking, our next 10-year, our master plan calls for us to reach about 85 million passengers by 2037. So that is with quite a mix of aircraft operating out of Toronto Pearson, but on average, as the planes start to have more seats, then we'll be able to manage with the terminals that we envision, the infrastructure that we have, 85 million passengers.
Okay, thank you. So could you speak to the impact of potentially reducing the night flights then?
Right. So I go back and point out that we have communicated to our CNAC committee and members of the public that we are undertaking a study of our night flight operations. Night flights, you know, for a city like Toronto and other cities, these are flights that are coming from different parts of the country, be it Vancouver, Calgary, different time zones. We're also operating both arrivals and departures from Asian airports, and you know, so we are a global city. We're trying our best to serve the demand and the need for tourism, trade, and cargo, while respecting and managing within the restrictions.
And I'm going to ask you to speak to a hypothetical. Could you speak to the GTAA being in the care and control of another airport if we were to have one built within proximity of Pearson?
Well, I think there are examples of airports that operate as systems around the world. Today, Toronto Pearson operates within a voluntary network of airports. There's 11 airports in Southern Ontario that work together. That is not a mandate. It's not regulated in any fashion, but you know, it is a collaborative, cooperative network of airports that are looking forward to a day when there will be a demand of about 110 million passengers in Southern Ontario, and how collectively we can service them.
Thank you. I do have to share my time. I have a quick question for Sandra. Yes or no, please.
Okay.
If Billy Bishop was to be expanded, would your community be affected?
I honestly do not know.
Okay, thank you. Appreciate that.
Sorry.
I'll make it quick. I thank you all for being here. The role of us as MPs is to facilitate when there is a problem. And listening to Tang, I understood that there has been no consultation. So I think all these MPs here that are here because their constituents have been complaining. And when they complain, we send them to your information sessions, etc. And the concerns I've heard from DMRI has been that whenever they come up with solutions, they've been disregarded. And I think it is important for GTAA to actually listen to the concerns. I heard Sandra Best say that the Helios recommendations is what you would like to go with. So my question to GTAA is why? What is the problem in meeting the Helios recommendations? Because that was commissioned by the minister, by you guys, and it's a consultative process, and it took a lot of people to come to the table to listen to you guys and to listen to the constituents, and yet you have not come up with a solution. What is preventing you guys from bringing that solution? I am very comfortable, if you could say, I'm balancing the needs of the constituents with safety and with environmental issues. But you need to talk to people, you need to listen to them, you need to give them the credence that they do. And I think Tang also commissioned a pilot project where you have the report. So if you could give me some answers that we can take back to our constituents.
Sure, thank you for the question. Airport operations are very complex, and making changes to our operations does take time. And in fact, our friends at Tang also made mention, then Councillor Knoll, that changes are slowly happening, and I think that is a reflection of the complexity of the issue. You've asked a question about a series of different studies. There was one study in NAV Canada's independent airspace review that was undertaken by Helios, and that was released in September 2017. And NAV Canada responded with an action plan about how they would action the recommendations out of that report, and they are doing that on an ongoing basis and do update about that at each of our CNAC public meetings, and that does happen regularly. We also, as part of our own practice, commissioned Helios to do a noise management best practices benchmarking study for us, which we undertook and which forms the cornerstone of this noise management action plan that we are currently pursuing. So we are very much taking the recommendations that came out of that study and are exploring how to implement it. It's also important to know that we also conducted consultation around what that would look like and what our guiding principles need to be for consideration. And we did that through a randomly selected residence reference panel, which Tang also mentioned, but we also did that through a series of workshops throughout the summer of 2017 as well to gather that feedback and the guidance. And finally, you asked about the report from David Inch, and that and his recommendations as part of that report that went to NAV Canada actually fundamentally form what are the 6 ideas which Hilary referenced in her remarks, and those are 6 ideas that are currently being implemented now. So certainly it is frustrating, but things are happening at a slow pace, but good projects are going forward.
Mr. Virani.
So thank you. I'm going to build on what Yasmin and what Pam were saying, but I'll also ask a question directly of my constituents. So Ms. Best, thank you for being here. Thank you for illustrating this fact that concerns about airport noise are not germane to only those people that live proximate to an airport. They're germane to people that live under a flight path, and that flight path has increased dramatically over the last 6 or so years. Thank you for your advocacy. I want to give you a chance, and maybe Ms. Jacoby, a chance to comment on a few things, because I'm sharing my time with Mr. Hardy. The first point is about this accountability piece, and we're hearing about CNAC. And we have concerns about CNAC, and it's about the fact that it's, I think from your perspective, as I understood it from your submissions, it's ineffective. You're not seeing meaningful change. Can you elaborate on that a little bit, in particular of what we've just heard about industry partnership as we move forward with CNAC, and what does that mean to you? And also about what was just mentioned about the randomly selected citizens reference panel, because I understand there were concerns about that were expressed by Tang at the time.
Yeah, I mean, it's a big subject. There isn't enough time today, I don't think, to cover all the issues around CNAC, but I will talk about the reference panel that's been referred to. Imagine, if you will, again, that you've worked on these noise issues for 7 years. There are many constituents right across the GTA who have spent time and effort to work on these. And so we work day and night. For some of us, it became a full-time job. And when we start to see some kind of political action, and we thank our representatives for that, because frankly, that's what it took before political action, there was no movement, right? So then you find out that recommendations from the Helios report in terms of the GTAA part of it are going to be referred to a new panel that's going to be set up with 36 members who are going to be randomly selected across Toronto. They're going to be given 4 days of training and orientation. Now, fine people, I'm sure, with the very best of intentions, but they don't have any background information. And we are asked to go and present to them for, I think it was half an hour or an hour. And I think 3 or 4 other groups were asked to go. Well, you sort of sit back and you think to yourself, if you really wanted a reference panel that was going to have good recommendations and was going to really have an understanding of the issues they were tasked with commenting on, you would go to groups who had been involved in this for many years, who had educated themselves for many years on the separate language that really is aviation language, on issues concerned, on worldwide airports. You would at least put members from those committees on your panel, and then you might do some random selection of other people. But 4 days of and one of those days, I believe, was involved in orienting yourself with the airport, visiting the towers. This is not real consultation. And so when the word consultation is thrown out, what we found over the years, it's not real consultation. It's consultation with predetermined answers. We've all been there. We've all been to organizations that do this, right? And so you know what you want. You consult to that particular subject matter. And then you staff the tables, as I understand happened, with industry experts. So what are these good-hearted people going to come up with in terms of recommendations? You send out a survey across Toronto. Again, I actually spoke with the group that was hired to facilitate. They told me directly, and I have it on record, the GTAA designed this survey themselves, and this consultative group was only to carry out and facilitate. Well, those questions were all moving towards predetermined answers. And so you know, so that's theoretically a massive consultation and a group of people who were used to come up with recommendations on runway utilization, for instance. Well, runway utilization is a complicated thing. It's not as simple as runway utilizations. It's where are the crossover points? How will this affect other people? When you talk about predictable noise respite, what does that look like? And that's how we ended up with alternating the east and west runways on alternate weekends and deluging people already deluged with additional traffic on those weekends. So when we talk about consultation, we have to be very, very clear that it's meaningful consultation. And meaningful consultation, in our estimation, other than the Helios report, has been excessively hard to come by.
Okay. Two more questions quickly, but with respect to those Helios recommendations, there's recommendations about night flights and there's recommendations about the retrofits.
There are
Talk about sort of what you would like to see in terms of the night flights specifically, and about the pace of the changes, and about the retrofits to the planes, because it was mentioned by Ms. Marshall, but in terms of the speed of that occurring for the retrofitting of the planes.
I'm going to defer
brief, if you possibly can, answer to Mr. Varani.
Yes, absolutely. Our last official retrofit number was 5 retrofitted planes in June. I think that was up to 7 at the September CNAC meeting, and Michael Belanger would be in a better position to tell me how big the fleet was, but I think it's around 40 planes to be retrofitted, the A320s. That's supposed to be completed by 2019. They say that they'll get it done, either replace or retrofit. I think we'd all feel more comfortable in having more immediate information and better updates and an inquiry as to why it seems to be taking so long, or perhaps even a schedule as to when those planes are going to be retrofitted. I understand that they're supposed to be done during their regular maintenance. Could we see that? Could we see how many are going to be retrofitted? We'd feel more comfortable with that rather than going and being disappointed with 5 after 1 year.
Thank you very much. On to Ms. Block for 5 minutes.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. And I do want to welcome all of our witnesses here this morning. I should have done that in my first intervention. And I'm going to direct my questions to you, Ms. Marshall and Ms. Connolly. And perhaps you've touched on this, but I just want to confirm that other witnesses who have testified before this committee as part of our study have suggested imposing a total ban on night flights, as has been done at the Frankfurt airport, or imposing a steep surcharge for night flights. What impact would such a policy have on your airport, and how would a ban or surcharge on night flights affect your ability to compete with other large international airports nearby, such as Buffalo?
I guess I'd start by saying that there are many types of traffic that come in during the night. There are about 53 flights that come in at present during the nighttime hours. There are a small number of them that are cargo. About 1% of the night movements would be related to cargo. There are some sun destinations. There are some Asian and international destinations, as well as domestic routes. So within each of those movements, there are people, travelers, cargo that are vital to the local economy, and that we need to understand the consequences of potentially removing those flights or limiting them in some way. Now, if you look internationally at some of the big international hubs, Frankfurt would be one extreme. But there are many other airports, international airports, that have restricted hours, such as we do, restricted movements within those hours. So we think that while we can look at the formula, we can look at who is being served by those flights and what the economic opportunity as well as impact is, that the Greater Toronto Area and the country will continue to need night flights to serve our economy. And whether those flights are coming into Toronto Pearson or another airport in the Greater Toronto Area, there's still going to be an impact. So we're potentially just talking about moving an issue from one airport to another.
Okay, thank you very much for that. There's been much discussion here this morning around public consultation and meaningful consultation. And I do understand that you recently developed a new noise management action plan. So based on your experience developing this strategy, what would you say are the most significant steps airports can take to mitigate the impact of aircraft noise for surrounding communities? And can you tell us what role public consultations have played in creating your noise management program at the GTA?
Sure. So there's a couple questions there, I think. One is how we consulted to develop our noise management action plan, and then a piece of the best practices study and a piece of the noise management action plan is to improve how we work with surrounding communities. To produce the noise management action plan, as we mentioned, the foundational document that guided us was the Helios best practice study. As Hilary mentioned, it looked at 26 airports worldwide and came forward with a series of recommendations. From that are a series of 10 commitments that are like vision statements, and under those vision statements are a series of actions that we need to take. Some things are doing things we already do, doing them better. Some things are stopping to do some things that aren't making any impact. And of course, also as part of this, we will over the next 5 years be introducing 9 new programs. As part of the best practices research, it did look at what other airports do, how they conduct their noise committees and their consultation, and we certainly came up short. That was a very fair recommendation. Challenges with our committee were the representation and the process through which committee members are appointed. And then one of the biggest pieces of feedback as part of that research is that our noise committee didn't have a meaningful action plan or work program. So now that we do have this noise management action plan that is much more ambitious than ones that we've had in the past, we certainly do have a really solid work plan going forward, and we'll be making recommendations to make sure that we have the proper elected official and resident support and infrastructure in place to advise and guide us on how we move forward on these programs. Revolutionary things like Canada's first voluntary insulation program, for example. So there's big initiatives ahead.
Thank you.
All right, thank you very much. On to Mr. Graham and Mr. Oliphant. You're sharing.
Yeah, if you can warn me when I have about 2 minutes left so that he can get his question in, that'd be helpful. Very quick question for Ms. Marshall to start. You mentioned in your opening comments that you're aiming to make Pearson the best airport in the world. It is, at the moment, the most expensive airport in the world outside of Japan. And I'm wondering on what measure you would consider it the best airport.
Actually, Toronto Pearson, I don't know what basis what information you're
expensive
going
to land
on
at. It's the highest landing fees. Yeah.
But we've done more recent studies where, by virtue of bringing our landing fees down over the last 7 years and holding them steady, we brought them down by about 30%. We've held them steady. We've also, we fall in the mid-range on airport improvement fees amongst Canadian airports. So we're certainly heading in the right direction. We have long-term agreements with our carriers to control the costs. So I think in terms of being a financially sustainable airport, we're working very hard to continue to head in that track.
So by what measure are you hoping to become the best airport in the world? Like, it's a very subjective thing to call yourself.
So there probably be a number of factors that we'd like to call ourselves the best airport in the world on. So for example, passenger service. It was just this year that we were recognized as the best large airport in North America amongst large airports for passenger service that's voted on by passengers. So I know on behalf of the 300 plus employers and the 50,000 workers at Toronto Pearson who all, come together every day to get planes moving and serve passengers, that's been an important point of recognition. Making sure that we're environmentally sustainable, that we manage our stormwater, that we introduce sustainability programs, as well as managing our operations safely.
My time is going short. It's a very quick question. Also following up on a previous comment. You mentioned that Pearson's part of a network of 11 airports that work together, but we've also heard testimony here that Pearson has effectively poached cargo traffic from Hamilton. So is it competition or cooperation?
I'd say it's cooperation. We haven't poached cargo traffic from Hamilton. I'm not sure what that refers to, but we do have a market that many carriers want to be as close to as possible. So understandably, they make a choice. We can't force carriers to go and operate at any airport. That's not under the terms of our ground lease. We're not allowed to do that. So we continue to.
Okay, Mr. Oliphant. Thank you, Mr. Graham.
Thank you all for being here, and thank you particularly for Tang for your long time engagement on this issue, and thanks for helping us as MPs to understand this issue quite at depth and with a really fact-based approach that has helped me a lot. I think there must be some amusement on the opposition side to see all the government folks here attempting to solve a problem. And I've been on that side during this issue, and I've been on this side during this issue, and I recognize that one of the issues the reality is we have a system of oversight that is completely out of the hands of what we're trying to do as elected officials. And it was there when I was in opposition and I was attempting to get to the government, and the government now were on this side, and it must be amusing for them. Is there a model of oversight that, and I'm looking at Tang particularly, that you can have envisioned that could make this more responsive so that consultation is real, elected officials have an insight and an impact in it, and citizens groups actually have a say without treading upon safety and issues that I know you care about?
Well, there are a number of things, and I'll certainly defer to Rini on this one, but from my perspective, because these are two private companies, they are not subject to freedom of information, so we do not know, in fact, how decisions are made. So if the government makes a decision, we know, right? So if NAVCAN tells us we can't do this for safety reasons and we can't fly this way, but then 2 years later, 3 years later, it's now doable. You see, if we had known in the beginning how that decision was made and we had insight into that, but because they're private companies, so our level of oversight would involve some access to freedom of information that would allow our elected MPs especially to understand how NAVCAN and GTA behind closed doors makes those decisions, and that is the key. When we find out after decisions are made, it's a fait accompli. There may be consultation.
So an example of that for me would be runway usage. And I would like, if you have some ideas on runway usage that you could get to us, and then we could look at how we actually make that happen, because I think you've got some good ideas there.
I'd be happy to answer that. We actually brought a few slides, if you'd like to refer to them. I can maybe point those out so that they would bring up the examples that you were speaking about. First slide was our background information. I'm going to go on to the second slide, and I can't, and I don't know why, Marie-France.
Sorry, on your report, it'll be distributed to the committee. We're kind of looking at a new system here, but I think that doesn't really work so well.
So MP Oliphant mentioned that we were fact-based, and that is important to us. We know that aviation issues are emotional, and they're very personal, and at some point we have to remove the emotion from that and somehow come to a solution. And I have heard in the previous hearing, and I thank Member Block, that we are of the opinion that beyond the emotion, we have to have good data to find a solution. And as a facts-based group, we have done that. We have our materials showing you our noise terminal readings and how incredibly high they are at 20 kilometers away from the airport. The highest reading that was taken was at Spadina Road in St. Clair. So for those of you who know the Toronto area, it was 81 decibels, far higher than many in the Mississauga or Oakville area or areas close to the airport. In addition, we've done runway utilization. I would like to point out that what we've brought today is only part of a very large PowerPoint presentation that was presented on May 25th as part of MP Oliphant's invitation. And just to follow up with lack of response, that was done on May 25th, and we have yet to have a response from CNAC.
Okay, thank you very much, Mr. Liepert. You've got the bells are ringing for a vote, so can we continue for a couple of more minutes? All right, okay. Mr. Liepert?
Yes, Madam Chair. I think it's important that I make a comment following Mr. Oliphant's comments, because I do not want, I'm not sure if we're still televised or not, but I do not want anyone to in any way misinterpret what was said, that this side of the table is not taking this issue seriously. And I know Mr. Oliphant's not a regular member of this committee, but we did have a number of witnesses, Calgary Airport Authority and others, which we spent plenty of time questioning on. In recognizing this morning, our panel is very localized to the GTA. There are 6 GT area MPs at the table, so the intent here by us this morning was to allow plenty of time for GTA area MPs to question the panel that is all localized. So I wanted to put that on record that, and I'm not suggesting Mr. Oliphant said that, I just don't want an interpretation to be made that somehow we aren't taking this issue very seriously. And just, Mr. Oliphant, just for your information, I represent a riding in Calgary that is a 30-minute drive from the airport. Because of a new runway, NAV Canada has changed the flight path, and I, in fact, on our week break, 2 weeks ago now, held a town hall meeting with NAV Canada Airport Authority folks and residents. So it's a big issue in Calgary as well, in a riding that never believed the MP would ever have issues with aircraft noise. So I just wanted to put that on record, Madam Chair.
Thank you very much. It is 10:44. So I'm going to have to end the meeting unless, does anybody want to continue on for another 10 minutes or so? I think everybody's had enough since we started at 8 o'clock this morning. And may I say to our witnesses, thank you so very much for coming, to all of you. Thank you to our airport authorities for working very hard to try to find solutions together with the community. All right? Thank you very much. Thank you to the members for your great cooperation.